Hello and welcome to the role of integrity in building professional women's sports, which is a special discussion that is part of 2023 SIGA Sport Integrity Week, which is a global program, if you're not familiar, that happens every year and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So my name is Caroline Fitzgerald. I'm the CEO and founder of Goals, which is a women's sports business, media platform, and marketing agency that specializes in showing brands the business value around investing in women's sports. For today's conversation, I'm very thrilled to be joined by two amazing women in sports. We have Laura Miranda and Jen Rottenberg. These are two incredible leaders that have so much experience conducting good business within the sports industry. So today we're going to specifically talk about women's sports. So as this women's sports industry in general is really still in its infancy phase, especially compared to men's sports, we have an opportunity here to really do it right and build a sports world that's rooted in core values like community, innovation, equity, and of course, integrity. So in honor of SIGA Sports Integrity Week, we're going to have a talk about the role that integrity plays in building the women's sports industry. So we're going to jump right in. Laura, I'm going to start with you. Why do you think that it's important for integrity to be a foundational building block of the women's sports industry?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I think that's a very loaded question, but very simply, I think, as you said, women's sports is in its infancy, which means it's inherently disadvantaged, right? And so I think extra precaution has to be taken to make sure that people aren't taken advantage of and they're given as much of a fair and equal opportunity to excel as anyone else in the sports space. Yeah, I'll stop there, but it's definitely a very deep question.
There's no doubt about that. Jen, did you have anything you wanted to add on to what Laura said?
Also, I would second that I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Caroline, and happy to be here with you, Laura, as well. I think I might just take it a step broader and say, I feel like just in society, especially today in society, I feel like there are a lot of issues swirling around rights for women. And so I think it's an even more critical time to think about integrity and how we protect women athletes, because in general, I think as a society, we're having a little bit of trouble protecting women overall. So from that perspective, I think there's a broader element to just the time that we're in as well.
Yeah, I agree. And that takes me right into another question I have, which is around the idea of protecting women athletes. So this topic continues to come up in the women's sports space about how important it is for people in positions of power to protect women athletes and to do right on behalf of women athletes. So Jen, I want to stay with you. What does acting with integrity look like when it comes to being an owner or a leader of a professional women's sports franchise?
Sure. I mean, I think the number one thing I've been involved in the Olympic movement for a long time, and for quite some time now, there's been the Safe Sport organization, and obviously there's protections within the Ted Stevens Act. And so, as a former member of an NGB staff and as a current NGB board member, we're constantly really drilled in a lot of these issues around what to do if you suspect that there is any sort of abuse or harassment, and I think that the number one thing in all of that is accepting the initial reporter of the situation at face value and not making judgments, and then trying to get the right people involved to conduct investigations and determine what's actually going on. And so I think that extends throughout. To be honest, I don't even think it's just about women's sports. I mean, we've seen in the last however many years a number of reportings of male athletes as, young athletes that were abused. I mean, there's the huge Penn State scandal. It's not just to women athletes, but obviously they have historically been a little bit more vulnerable. So I think as an owner, as team staffs, as league staffs, you can't dismiss when somebody comes and tells you there's something happening. We saw how that turned into something huge and horrible at NWSL when people did not listen. We saw how horrifyingly horrible it went at USA Gymnastics when people just did not listen. or listened and chose to ignore. And so I think to me, that's the number one. Just you have to listen and then figure out how to act. Because I feel too many times women are just dismissed.
Absolutely. We need to believe women. It is that simple. That is the first step.
Yeah.
Laura, I want to shift gears a little bit away from what Jen was just talking about into the role of brand partnerships within the sports industry. I know you have a ton of expertise in this space. Jen, so do you. We work together very closely on brand partnerships in women's sports, specifically professional women's hockey. But Laura, my question is, what role do you think integrity plays when it comes to building strong brand partnerships in sports?
Yeah, I think integrity can take on a lot of different meanings, like we were kind of talking about earlier. Relative to brand partnerships, I think integrity starts with authenticity, right? I think, well, first of all, it's hard to get anything sold if you don't know what the core values of it are. But even if you do get it sold and the partnership gets delivered to the marketplace, the consumers and fans can see right through it, and you're going to get backlash and worst case, get canceled, right? So integrity for me starts with authenticity of the partnership, but then also I think it's on the partner and it's on the partners to execute with integrity and be able to deliver upon the things that they promised and sold. And that's just good for business, right? Because you don't want to be turning over your partners every year. That takes a lot of money to replace. So it's important to start with integrity, authenticity, and see that all the way through.
I love that answer. Jen, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I love that answer as well. And I love that when I hear you say on authenticity, I love that it's both external facing and internal facing between the partners, and then how it comes across to the public. I think that's great. The thing that then jumped to me as a second to that is really that connection between the partners and this element that we also a little bit talked about before of honesty, right? And both sides, when you're building that partnership and executing your way through it, is really putting your cards on the table in both directions, because if people don't know really what you want or what you need or what you can deliver, they can't help you on the other side. So to me, that's a foundational element as well.
I agree. Honesty, authenticity, transparency, all essential to building great partnerships. I want to talk now about business practices. And we know that it is good business to act with integrity. It has been proven time and time again, both in the sports world and outside of it. So are there any examples that either of you, I'm going to open this up now, have noticed specifically in women's sports of the connection between acting with integrity and driving business results?
All right. I mean, I'll jump in then. One that's top of mind to me right now, because I've been obsessively watching the U.S. Open, which has been a great tournament, the tennis over the last week or so, and right there on center court on the broadcast, you're seeing the 50 years of equal pay. And so to me, what's interesting is go all the way back to when the U.S. Open actually made that commitment, and then eventually the other Grand Slam tournaments followed. And women's tennis is an incredibly strong property. And I think a piece of that is because from quite some time now, there has been financial opportunity for women in the sport. Some of the other sports, WNBA and WSL, they're newer, and the financial opportunities they're not even close to catching up to the men at this point. But I think the reason we have such amazing athletes being able to make a living as professional WTA tour players, so that the quality of the play is so great, and what comes from great quality of play, huge fan interest, right? You have the stands are full, the TV ratings are huge, because it started all the way back then, 50 years ago, when giving some financial equity. So, and to me, that's an ethical decision, right? Like, the women may or may not have really justified that 50 years ago in terms of their performance, but it was the right thing to do.
Agreed.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think I come at it from a more commercial lens, right? That's my lens. And as someone who has been selling women's sports properties a lot among men's and non-traditional properties, right? I'm always trying to look for the justification of ROI. There's constantly, I'm getting that question of ROI. And what's funny is the ROI is there. I mean, there's tons of stats and results that prove not only is it there in a lot of cases, the ROI is exponential, especially compared to men in investing in women's sports, right? So I think it's important though to dig into why. And I saw one of the most recent examples that I came across that I thought was interesting because I hadn't heard about it that much was the folks that Got Milk at Cannes this past year mentioned that they had previously sponsored the Olympics and the NFL, but then they've recently pivoted to like the New York City Marathon and investing in women's athletes, and they were selling like 10 to 1 gallons of milk compared to those big platforms. And so I think it's important to contextualize the returns. And so the way I've been breaking it down to brands is like, here's kind of the 3 reasons, right? One, the reason that happened for Got Milk was the demos were better aligned, right? Like, yes, the audiences were bigger with the NFL and the Olympics, but they were wasting a lot of money hitting people that weren't going to be buying their product anyways. I think also you're seeing with any niche influencer or rights holder, right? Their audience may not be as big, but it's a lot more engaged. So anytime they see a partner in the right setting, in an authentic and integral setting, they're going to be a lot more willing to act and be loyal and purchase, right? And then lastly, I think you guys would all attest to this, right? Because of the pay discrepancies on the court, on the field, women rely on sponsorship so much more than men. And so they're just incentivized to be better partners, and they are better partners more often than not. So I think it's just reminding brands that bigger isn't always better. You can get a lot better ROI being more tactful and partnering with women's sports.
I agree. And I want to throw in an example as well of Angel City FC and everything they've done around their sponsorship model, with 10% of every brand partnership that they sign going back into a local community organization in Los Angeles. And that model that they created worked it drove incredible business results. They sold 35 million in sponsorship revenue before the team even played a single game. And that clearly resonated with brands. It clearly is resonating with the Los Angeles community. So investing in community, investing in the people around you, that's an act of integrity, and it's clearly working for Angel City FC. And I love to see examples like that pop up in women's sports as well.
As a season ticket holder, I would echo that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our conversation. Do either of you have any final thoughts that you'd love to share on the connection between integrity and sports before we wrap this up?
I would just say that I think it's important to reiterate that men, by nature of being men, aren't the problem, or that they lack integrity, right? It's just that we've all grown up in a world where the system was built for one particular type of human, right? And so we're all trying to relearn it together. So I just have huge respect for the people that we all know and how we got together, right? They're Dan Mannix, people like Dan and my husband, who's in the sports business industry as well. Like, men or people who have those positions of power, but they're ego-less enough to realize that they have blind spots, and they're willing to rethink their position to do what's right for that product or that market or that setting, right? Regardless of that. So I think it's just really important that, not hating on men, we're not hating on men's sports. It's just like we all have to rethink this together, and there's just tons and tons of opportunity for everybody to share it, and I'm excited to see it come to life.
So am I. Jen, anything you wanted to close out with?
Well, I totally agree with you, Laura. I think men are very critical to the whole equation, and a little bit on the flip side as well, alluding to what I said a little bit more at the top in terms of a lot of these issues are not women only or women's sports only. They're societal, and I hope that people are conducting themselves with integrity and authenticity across all sports, men's or women's or non-binary or anything else, right? So I think that it's just a critical piece of how we conduct ourselves, right? Treat others as would like to be treated, and honor your commitments, and believe in your customers and believe in your athletes and all those different sorts of things, I think are just important for the entire sports industry. And I'm glad we have the focus on women's sports. Obviously, it's a passion of mine as well. But it's something that we can all strive for across, the industry as a whole.
I agree. And as we start out building the women's sports space, I think keeping integrity at the center of everything that we do is really just going to set us up for success in the long haul. And at the end of the day, investing in equitable opportunities for women in sports is an act of integrity. So there's really a lot of opportunity here. And if we keep integrity at the center of it, we're all going to do really well in this space. So we're going to close it out. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming on. Laura, Jen, thank you for sharing your insights. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. And everybody else, please continue to tune into content from SIGA Sports Integrity Week. There's so much wonderful digital and in-person programming happening. And we're so thrilled you joined us today for a discussion about women's sports and integrity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.